The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, but to Julian Carter, it reeked of betrayal. At 32, he stood rigid in a tailored suit, his jaw tight as he faced his father, Richard, across the sterile room. This wasn't just about money. It was about a promise broken, a family fractured, and a mother's memory desecrated. San Francisco's skyline loomed beyond the courthouse windows, indifferent to the storm brewing inside. Julian had spent years building a life as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, his ambition fueled by the loss of his mother, Elena, who died when he was 16. She'd been the warmth in their home, the one who taught him to code on an ancient laptop, her laughter filling their modest Mission District apartment. But Richard, he'd always been distant, a finance broker obsessed with status, who'd moved them to a sterile mansion in Pacific Heights after Elena's death. Now, at 60, Richard sat smugly, his lawyer flipping through papers, claiming the inheritance Elena left Julian was misallocated. "You can't rewrite her will," Julian snapped, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She wanted me to have it, not you." His mother's estate, her savings, her jewelry, the tiny beach house in Half Moon Bay, was all he had left of her. Richard's attempt to claim it felt like stealing her memory. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, peered over her glasses. "Mr. Carter, you allege your father manipulated the estate's execution. Evidence?" Julian's lawyer, Priya Sharma, a sharp 40-year-old with a reputation for dismantling lies, slid a folder across the table. Elena Carter's will, notarized in 2005, explicitly names Julian as sole beneficiary. Richard Carter's countersuit lacks substantiation. Priya's voice was steady, but Julian's pulse raced. He hadn't wanted this fight. He'd begged his father to settle quietly, but Richard's refusal, his cold insistence that Elena's wishes were misguided, forced Julian's hand. As Priya argued, Julian's mind drifted to the last time he saw his mother. She'd been in the hospital, her olive skin pale, her dark eyes still fierce despite the cancer eating her lungs. "Promise me," she'd whispered, gripping his hand. "You'll live bravely, Jules, for yourself." He hadn't understood then, chalking it up to her pain meds. Now, at 32, her words haunted him. Had she known this day would come? The judge adjourned for the day, and Julian stepped into the foggy San Francisco evening. He needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of his father's gaze. He drove to Ocean Beach, where he and Elena used to walk, her stories of growing up in Miami's Cuban community filling the air. The waves crashed, relentless, and Julian felt a pang of guilt. Was suing his father brave or just revenge? His phone buzzed. A text from his best friend, Marcus, a 35-year-old graphic designer with a knack for pulling Julian out of his head. "Meet me at the Castro. You need a drink." Julian hesitated but agreed. The Castro, vibrant and unapologetic, was where he'd first felt free after coming out as gay at 20. Maybe it could ground him now. At the bar, neon lights danced across Marcus's locks as he slid Julian a whiskey. "You look like you're carrying the world, man," Marcus said, his brown eyes soft with concern. Julian exhaled, recounting the day's tension. Marcus listened, then leaned in. "You're fighting for her, not against him. Remember that." Julian nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. What if he lost? What if Richard's money and influence buried Elena's truth? As they talked, a woman approached, Lylan Gwynn, 58, a local artist with short silver hair and a warm, weathered smile. Marcus introduced her as a friend from his gallery days. "Heard about your case," Lila said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "I knew your mom, Julian. Not well, but enough." Julian froze. "You knew her? How?" Lila's eyes softened, a flicker of something, grief, maybe, crossing her face. "We met in the 90s at a women's art collective. Elena was special. She had this fire, this way of seeing people. She paused, glancing at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. There's something you should know, but not here. Meet me tomorrow at my studio in Dogpatch. Julian's heart thudded. What could Lila know about his mother that he didn't? He spent the night restless, memories of Elena swirling. Her late-night painting sessions, her cryptic smiles when he asked about her past. By morning, he was at Lila's studio, a converted warehouse filled with vibrant canvases. Lila handed him a coffee, her hands steady but her expression guarded. Your mom and we were close, Lila began, sitting across from him. Not just friends. More. She let the word hang, heavy with meaning. Julian's breath caught. His mother, in love with a woman? It didn't fit the image he'd held. Elena, the devoted wife, the perfect mother. Yet Lila's voice, raw with honesty, made him listen. She loved you fiercely, Julian, Lila continued, but she hid parts of herself. From you, from Richard. She was scared. Scared of losing you, of what the world would do to her truth. Lila pulled out a small box, its edges worn. Inside were letters, photos, sketches, all in Elena's hand. One photo showed Elena and Lila, young, laughing on a beach, arms around each other. The back read, with L, 1992. My heart. Julian's throat tightened. Why didn't she tell me? Lila sighed. It was a different time. She married Richard to build a life for you, but it cost her. She wrote those letters to me but never sent them. She wanted you to know her, all of her, when you were ready. Julian opened a letter, Elena's familiar script spilling across the page. Lila, you are my truth, but Julian is my world. I can't risk him for us. His hands shook. His mother had loved someone else, had hidden it to protect him. And now Richard was trying to erase her legacy. I'll testify, Lila said firmly. Her will wasn't just about money. It was her way of giving you freedom, Julian, to live as yourself. He left the studio, the letters clutched to his chest, his mother's voice echoing in his mind. The fight with Richard wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about uncovering Elena's truth, about honoring the woman who loved bravely, even in silence. Julian's apartment in the Mission District was a sanctuary of chaos. Code on his laptop, half-read books stacked on the coffee table, and now, his mother's letters spread across the floor like a map to a life he'd never known. At 32, he thought he'd understood Elena, her sacrifices, her love, but Lila's revelation had cracked that image open. His mother, a woman who loved another woman, had buried that truth to shield him. He reread her words, each letter a confession of love for Lila, of fear for Julian's future in a world that wasn't kind to difference. One line burned into him. I chose safety for Jules, but it feels like betrayal to you, Lila. Forgive me. The guilt in those words mirrored his own. He'd spent years angry at Richard for his coldness, but had he missed Elena's struggles too? The next morning, Julian met Priya at her office, a sleek space in downtown San Francisco with a view of the Bay Bridge. Priya, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, scanned the letters with a lawyer's precision. These are powerful, she said, her voice measured but her eyes bright with strategy. They show Elena's intent, her clarity of mind. If Lila testifies, it could sway the judge. Prove your father's claim is baseless. But it's personal, Julian said, his voice low. She hid this for a reason. Am I betraying her by using it? Priya leaned forward, her gaze steady. You're not exposing her, Julian. You're honoring her. She wanted you to have her truth, her legacy. This is how you protect it. Julian nodded, but doubt lingered. Exposing Elena's love for Lila in court felt like opening a wound. What would people say? What would Richard do with that truth? He drove to Marcus's loft in Oakland, needing his friend's clarity. Marcus, sprawled on a couch with a sketchpad, listened as Julian poured out his fears. "Man, your mom was a badass," Marcus said, setting his pencil down. "She loved hard, even when it hurt her. You're not outing her, you're letting her be seen. That's power." Julian exhaled, the weight in his chest loosening. Marcus was right. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about Elena's story, her right to be whole. He spent the evening with Marcus, laughing over old photos, grounding himself for the battle ahead. The next court date arrived, a gray morning that matched Julian's mood. Richard's lawyer, a slick man named Greg Harper, leaned into his argument with venom. "Elena Carter was unwell when she wrote that will," Harper claimed, gesturing to Richard, who sat stone-faced. "Her judgment was clouded, her decisions erratic. Richard, as her husband, deserves her estate." Julian's blood boiled. Erratic? His mother had been a rock, even in her final days. Priya stood, her voice cutting through Harper's lies. "We have new evidence," she said, presenting Lila's letters. "These show Elena Carter's clarity and intent. She chose her son as her beneficiary to ensure his independence." The judge raised an eyebrow, requesting the letters. Julian's heart pounded as she read, her expression unreadable. Then Lila took the stand. At 58, she carried herself with quiet strength, her silver hair catching the courtroom's fluorescent light. "Elena was my partner," Lila said, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. "She loved Julian more than anything, but she hid our relationship to protect him from judgment. Her will wasn't a mistake. It was her truth." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Julian glanced at Richard, whose face had gone pale, his hands clenched. Did he know? Had he suspected Elena's secret? The judge called a recess, and Julian approached Lila outside, his voice thick. "Thank you. I wish I'd known her like you did." Lila's smile was bittersweet. "She wanted you to know her heart, Julian. You're doing that now." That night, Julian walked the streets of the Castro, the neighborhood's rainbow flags fluttering in the fog. He felt Elena's presence in the vibrancy around him, in the couples holding hands, unafraid. But the fight wasn't over. Richard's silence in court unnerved him. What was his father hiding? The fog hung low over San Francisco, cloaking Julian's drive to the courthouse in a dreamlike haze. He clutched Elena's letters in his bag, their weight both anchor and fire. Lila's testimony had shifted something in him. He wasn't just fighting for money. He was fighting for his mother's right to be known, fully and unapologetically. Inside the courtroom, the air crackled with tension. Richard's lawyer, Harper, paced like a predator, his eyes glinting with a new strategy. "We contest the authenticity of these letters," Harper declared, holding up copies of Elena's words. "They could be fabricated, a ploy to manipulate the court." Julian's stomach twisted. Fabricated? The accusation was a knife to his mother's memory. Priya shot to her feet. "These letters were verified by a forensic document analyst," she countered, producing a report. "The handwriting, the paper, the ink, all match Elena Carter's personal effects from 1992 to 2005. The judge nodded, but Harper wasn't done. "Even if authentic," he pressed, "they prove Elena was deceptive, hiding an affair. Her state of mind was compromised, making her will invalid." Julian's fists clenched. An affair? Harper was twisting Elena's love into something sordid, erasing its truth. Lila, seated behind Julian, leaned forward, her whisper fierce. "Don't let them rewrite her." Julian nodded, his resolve hardening. He caught Richard's eye. His father's face was a mask, but a flicker of unease betrayed him. Did Richard know more than he let on? The judge allowed Priya to call a new witness. Dr. Amara Patel, a 45-year-old psychologist who'd counseled Elena during her illness. Amara, poised and articulate, took the stand. Elena was lucid until her final days, she testified. She spoke often of Julian, of ensuring his future. Her will was deliberate, a reflection of her values. Harper cross-examined, his tone biting. Did she mention a relationship with Lila and Gwen? Amara's gaze didn't waver. She spoke of love, of regret for choices made to protect her son. She never named Lila, but her clarity was undeniable. The testimony landed like a blow. Julian felt a surge of pride for his mother's strength, but also grief for her silence. Why hadn't she trusted him with her truth? As the court adjourned, he lingered, watching Richard leave with Harper. Something in his father's stiff posture felt off, like a man carrying a secret too heavy to hold. That evening, Julian visited the Half Moon Bay beach house, a small cottage Elena had loved. The salty air stung his eyes as he walked the shore, imagining his mother and Lila here, their love carved into fleeting moments. He found a sketch in the box Lila gave him, a drawing of the beach, Elena's signature looping at the bottom. Beneath it, in faint pencil, "For L, my safe harbor." He called Marcus, his voice breaking. She deserved better, man. A life where she didn't have to hide. Marcus, ever steady, replied, "You're giving her that now. Keep going." The next day, Priya uncovered a bombshell. Bank records showing Richard had accessed Elena's accounts after her death, siphoning funds meant for Julian. "This isn't just greed," Priya said, her eyes blazing. "It's control. He's trying to erase her choices." Julian confronted Richard outside the courthouse, his voice low but fierce. "Did you know about Mom and Lila? Is that why you're doing this?" Richard's face hardened, but his silence spoke volumes. "You don't get to bury her truth," Julian said, walking away, his heart pounding with purpose. The courtroom felt smaller each day, its walls closing in as Julian's fight for his mother's legacy grew fiercer. At 32, he'd never imagined battling his own father, Richard, over money, let alone uncovering Elena's hidden love for Lila. But the bank records Priya had found, proof of Richard's tampering, changed everything. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about control, about silencing Elena's truth. Priya presented the records in court, her voice sharp as she outlined Richard's unauthorized withdrawals. "These actions violate the terms of Elena Carter's will," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet projected on a screen. Richard Carter diverted funds meant for Julian, undermining his wife's explicit wishes. Harper, Richard's lawyer, scrambled to counter. "These were joint accounts," he argued, his tone slick. Richard had every right to access them. But the judge's frown deepened, and Julian saw a crack in Richard's composure. His father's hands trembled, just for a moment. During a break, Julian found Lila in the hallway, her silver hair tucked behind her ears. "He knew," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Not everything, but enough. Elena told me once that Richard suspected she loved someone else. He never asked, but he pulled away. It's why she stayed, so you'd have a family." Julian's chest ached. His mother had sacrificed her happiness for him, and Richard had repaid her with indifference, now greed. "I'm sorry," he said to Lila, the words heavy, "for what she lost." Lila's smile was soft, pained. "She never lost me, Julian. Not really. And she never stopped loving you." Back in court, Priya called Julian to the stand. He hadn't planned to testify, but the weight of Elena's letters, of Lila's courage, pushed him forward. At 32, with his dark hair slightly graying at the temples, he stood tall, his voice steady. "My mother was the strongest person I knew," he began. "She taught me to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. This inheritance isn't just money. It's her promise to me, to live freely as myself." I'm gay and she knew that. She wanted me to have a life she couldn't. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Even Harper paused, his usual smirk gone. Julian glanced at Richard, hoping for a flicker of remorse, but his father's face was unreadable, a wall of denial. That night, Julian returned to the beach house, needing its quiet to process. He found another letter in the box, this one addressed to him. Jules, it read. If you're reading this, you know my heart. I hid Lila to keep you safe, but I hope you'll forgive me. Live your truth, my love. Tears fell as he realized Elena had always seen him, even when she couldn't show herself. The next day, a surprise witness appeared. Elena's old friend, Rosa Delgado, a 62-year-old librarian from Miami. Rosa's warm brown eyes met Julian's as she took the stand. Elena confided in me, Rosa said. She loved Lila, but she married Richard for stability, for Julian. Her will was her way of giving him freedom she never had. Rosa's words were a lifeline, tying Elena's love to Julian's fight. As the judge reviewed the evidence, Julian felt a shift. The truth was winning not just for him but for his mother's memory. The final day in court dawned clear, San Francisco's fog lifting as if to mirror the clarity Julian felt. At 32, he stood at the edge of truth, his mother's letters and Lila's courage anchoring him. This fight, against his father, Richard, for Elena's inheritance, was now about more. It was about letting his mother's love, her whole self, breathe again. The judge, her expression softened by days of testimony, called for closing arguments. Priya stood, her voice resonant. Elena Carter's will was a deliberate act of love for her son Julian. The evidence, letters, bank records, testimonies, proves her intent. Richard Carter's actions were not those of a grieving husband, but of a man seeking control, even after her death. Harper's rebuttal was weaker, his confidence shaken by Rosa's testimony and the bank records. Richard acted in good faith, he claimed, but the words felt hollow. Julian watched his father, 60 and rigid, his eyes avoiding the room. Did he feel the weight of Elena's truth closing in? The judge deliberated for an hour, the longest hour of Julian's life. When she returned, her voice was firm. The court finds in favor of Julian Carter. Elena Carter's will stands as written. The estate, including all assets, is awarded to the plaintiff. She paused, her gaze softening. This court recognizes the courage it took to bring this truth to light. Julian exhaled, relief flooding him. Lila squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears. Priya hugged him, whispering, "You did it. For her." Across the room, Richard stood abruptly and left, Harper trailing behind. Julian felt no triumph, only a quiet sorrow for the father who'd chosen pride over love. That evening, Julian invited Lila, Marcus, and Rosa to the Half Moon Bay beach house. They sat on the porch, the ocean's rhythm steadying their hearts. Lila shared stories of Elena, her love for painting, her quiet defiance, her dreams for Julian. Rosa added memories from Miami, of Elena dancing to salsa under streetlights. Marcus, ever the optimist, raised a glass to Elena, who loved without limits. Julian looked at the photo of his mother and Lila, their joy frozen in 1992. He realized this victory wasn't just about money. It was about giving Elena's love a voice. He'd used the inheritance to fund a scholarship for queer youth, a tribute to his mother's unspoken dreams. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Julian felt Elena's presence. She'd lived bravely, even in silence, and now he would too. He walked to the shore, the waves kissing his feet, and whispered, "I see you, Mom. All of you."